Hello, I'm Khalil Stell, and I don't usually make videos like this, but this particular video was pretty cringy to me, and it's in an area that I kind of love, motors and motor technology, motor control, and robotics in general. And I've been doing robotics for about 5, 6 years, so I thought to myself, you know what? This might be worthy of actually making a video about. So the dislike to like ratio, well, the likes is like 10K and the dislikes like 4K. So it's like, okay, I'm a little intrigued. What's up with this? Because I see the title of "Want to Save the World, Save the Planet." So I worked reinventing the motor. So I was like, oh, crazy, cool. I'm down for that. Uh, I would like to at least know. I want to know what the new motor technology is. So I started looking into this, and I didn't really quickly realize that this is all BS. So I'm gonna go into this. Hopefully, not take up too much time explaining all the silliness in this, and let's see what happens.
We have done something incredible that many considered impossible until now.
Most of the time when people think of electricity, they think of lighting. But half of the energy in the world goes into electric motors. Motors are everywhere. Your air conditioner, your refrigerator, cars, conveyor belts. Half of the energy that goes into motors is wasted. So how do we make every watt of energy and electricity?
Okay, so a couple things here. Um, yeah, a couple things I want to make very clear. So they make three claims. One of them is that like 50% of the energy in the world is used by motors, and like motors are everywhere. The second claim that motors are everywhere is pretty true. You have motors pretty much anywhere where you have a fan moving or something that needs to pump something or needs to actuate something. So that's totally a fine analysis. 50% of the energy, I don't know if that's really true, but it sounds truthful enough, and it's not really that important for the entire like video, whether or not it really matters. To some extent, it does, but trust me, it gets worse, so it's not going to matter that much. The problem here is that they have a lie here. You see that most electric motors are 50% efficient, or 50% of the energy is wasted. That is blatantly a lie. It is hard to find a motor. Actually, I don't know, as someone who buys motors often, where one would go and actually find a motor that is 50% efficient that's commercial. Almost no one sells those. Most motors are around 85% efficient. At a high end, 95%. Ooh, good stuff. At the low end, maybe like 70%, but never 50%. You can't really, it's not really a thing. So him saying that 50% of the energy is wasted is dubious at best.
Worthwhile.
A switch reluctance motor is not a new design of motorhead. That typically are used in sort of bulletproof industrial applications where you want something to run for decades at a time. So think nuclear power plants, those sorts of things.
They weren't available for the rest of the world because it was too hard to control. And that's the thing that we've taken over the finish line.
Climate change.
I'm not certain how it's too hard to control, but maybe he'll explain it. I know what he's going to say, and yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
Is the biggest challenge of our time, and we need to do everything we can in our power to reverse it.
If we could replace every motor in the world with our technology, we could cut 25% of carbon emissions.
All right, so one of the things that they did here is they obviously tried, throw a little catch back to, why we even have this video. It's because carbon emissions are a problem, and, climate change is a problem, so we need to fix it. I'm just going to say that their motors is not going to be the solution whatsoever. As we go deeper into some of the claims, you'll see how this is techno woo-woo, like trying to get people hyped for things that, already exists, really. Like, it's not even a new thing. This already exists, but we'll get into that later. Yeah.
Energy is all about supply and demand balance. We're totally focused on the demand side, so we're trying to reduce how much generation is required to still serve people. And that means that we can shut down the polluting fossil fuel burning generation sources like coal and oil and eventually natural gas. And then it accelerates the shift over to solar and other sustainable generation technologies.
Okay, so to some extent, that's kind of true. Like, let's say everything in every electronic or thing that we would ever really power with electricity uh, was like a 1,000th the power consumption that is now. Yeah, we wouldn't need really huge power plants. Probably want to keep them around, maybe, but like we wouldn't really need all that. Maybe we'd probably be able to just use wind and solar, and maybe some battery storage in order to just hold enough to supply our needs. but we're not there, and I don't think they're switching this motor is going to kind of accelerate that. But I noticed how they made that connection between how if we reduce overall energy usage, they're making things more efficient. Therefore, we can reduce and even turn down and shut down power plants. And they're making that connection, an implicit connection to their motors through this video. So even though they don't claim that directly, it is supposed to give that sense and that connection in your head that, oh, that like, oh, their motors must be providing this. When in reality, no, no, they won't. They are literally like, I'll get into this later, but they're literally like any other motor.
I first learned about switch reluctance motors about 6.5 years ago. What intrigued me at first was this thing is actually the simplest mechanical electric motor that can be made, but you need electronics and software that are very precisely shaping the current that go into that motor.
Well, you really should think of this as almost like a fighter jet. If the computers in that are not running, no human could fly that plane. But by being able to control it with a machine learning algorithm on relatively cheap compute power, now all of a sudden you can take something that is mechanically unstable and it ends up being more agile, and in this case more efficient, more powerful, and cheaper than any of the competing types of motors.
Okay, so they made a lot of, so they're trying to connect their systems to what a fighter jet has to do. These are extraordinarily like the these cannot be connected really. Like this is a pretty far extension. So it seems like from what I'm hearing that they're using machine learning models and AI in order to control their motors. And when the first couple times I've listened to this video, it made me think that the motors themselves are mechanically unstable, which would mean why would you use it? Like, most motors aren't mechanically unstable, so if your motor is mechanically unstable, that seems a little, maybe not the best thing for you to use for your applications. But I think they're trying to get back to the fact that fighter jets are really agile and in a way somewhat unstable. That gives you more flexibility. But when it comes down to motors, we don't need that kind of stability. Most times when it comes to three-phase induction motors, which is basically what they're showing off here. That picture right here, it looks like a standard three-phase induction motor that you'd use for industry. A lot of them, if they're only one phase, you can plug them directly into the wall and they'll move. And they'll move at the set speed that they're set to move at for that particular voltage. And they have a certain efficiency curve for how much you have to load them down to get just exactly where you need to be. You don't need anything fancy for this, and it's not like the software or even the hardware or even like the mechanisms to make this thing happen are new. We've been doing this for I think at this point 50, maybe even more years. So this seems kind of insane.
What I found was this really interesting patent that Mr. Piyush Desai had come up with.
The basic goal with an electric motor is to take electrical energy in and convert it into mechanical energy. For our motor, we apply a current to create an electromagnet, and we have a rotor that tries to align itself with the electromagnet we just created. So what we need to do is switch the current on and off, creating an electromagnet at the next coil, and the rotor tries to catch up and spin to align itself there. We have to switch the current on and off really fast, 20,000 times a second. The computing power, software, and sophistication required to do that made it quite simply impossible until now.
All right, I have observed and seen students as San Jose State they bought a little brushless motor, they bought an Arduino. It's another little microchip you can buy and program, and I've seen them control things basically in the same fashion that they described here. 20,000 times a second may sound like a lot from people who don't understand computing very well, but if you just think about your laptop, if you've ever heard of a CPU and how they usually spec them out, usually it's in they talk about the clock speed. And the clock speed for a typical laptop or just this Intel CPU or AMD CPU is going to be in the gigahertz range, meaning billions per second. So if you have a 1 gigahertz clocked CPU, and this is a bit of a stretch, but just accept it for now. It's not entirely true, but it's a close analogy. You can pretty much run 1 billion instructions per second, roundabout. let's say it only takes like 10 instructions in order to like, let's say turn on a current or turn off a current for something. That's still 100, basically 100 million instructions. Getting down to 20,000 pulses or changes in a sequence is actually pretty rudimentary. It's pretty simple. And let's say, okay, that's a laptop. That's a pretty hunkin' computer. Most microcontrollers, which are these small computing systems, all in one, so you can like control signals and stuff like that. Those systems are typically at the very minimum in the megahertz range. It's hard to find them actually anything lower than megahertz, I would say, from my experience. Usually they're in the tens of megahertz up to hundreds of megahertz. So creating such a signal is been around for a long, long period of time. And that's excusing the idea of actually just using straight hardware to do all this versus actually using software, which we do have chips for. I've built these motor controllers for I use the company called Allegro. They have a chip that does 3-phase and induction motor control. You just use their diagrams, done to go. So this statement that we haven't been able to do this up until now is completely and utterly ridiculous. I've done it personally. I've seen other people do it personally. I've seen even some freshmen do it. Smart freshmen, but like some freshmen in college do it at the end of their freshman year. Like this is something that's not complicated. You can make it more efficient. I mean, there's always things you can do to optimize the system, but there's claims here about 20,000 times a second, completely ridiculous and off base.
And it's finally not a hard decision to become more energy efficient. It's just good business. We look for where is there the biggest delta between what exists today and what is possible. So that's why we're focusing on buildings and agriculture as a big first market.
Many HVAC systems are essentially a single speed. They're on and off. Turntide Motors have complete variable speed control. So you can run your motor at any speed and save tremendous amounts of electricity.
I was very...
Okay, so this is one of my favorite parts of the video. So there's like a couple things that they said. I'm gonna start off with the first one, which had to do with like variable speed. Most motors are variable speed, just in general. A lot of times you just don't want them to be variable speed because you don't need it. Like if you're going to run an AC, you don't need the AC pump that moves the freon around to be variable speed. When you're running your AC for your refrigerator, same thing. When it comes to clothes, it really depends. Or, sorry, a washing machine kind of depends because sometimes like ours actually pulses the thing on and off versus actually trying to change the speed. But there are certain set speeds that it can go into. So this is actually something that's not unique by them. So I think that's ridiculous what they just stated there. Most AC induction or switch reluctance motors have speed control. So that's a bit of a falsehood. Actually, I think that's just blatantly just a lie. The second thing though, I just want to come back real quick, see if I can get there there.
Turntide Motors have complete variable speed control. So you can run your motor at any speed and save tremendous amounts of electricity.
What type of car is that? I'm not a car person, so I couldn't catch it, and I don't really know. But here's the thing. That sounds like not electric car. That explicitly sounds like an ICE car, an internal combustion car. Electric cars don't make roaring sounds like that. There's no reason. That clip has no business being in this video. So the fact that it's in here pleases me so much because it's so ridiculous. It's so absurd. Why in the absolute world would they ever consider the idea of adding in a combustion car into this? And you know what it's there for? Hype. It's just there to generate hype. Just trying to be, just hype into the veins directly. That's the kind of stuff that I absolutely love to see because it's something that really swindles a lot of VCs, people on Kickstarter, and stuff like that. It is disgusting. And yeah, so seeing that, I was like, just blew my mind when I first saw it.
I was very skeptical at some of the claims that Turntide was making. 30 to 60 to even sometimes 70% more efficient in the real world. And to see those claims actually bear out and to be able to dig into the data that third parties had done independently was an exciting moment for me. We are installing Turntide's motors in our Spartanburg plant in order to drive efficiency and significantly reduce the cost of electricity. BMW iVentures decided to invest in Turntide because this company is about as close to a no-brainer as we've ever seen in the sustainability space.
If you ask any...
I am certain that like given the base claim that motors are 50% efficient, and then you talk about how we found like they're 80% more efficient, yeah, no, like that would probably put you square around in like the 70 to 95% range when it comes to your efficiency. So I believe that they probably did some tests and said, yeah, this thing is, it is in fact 85%. So yeah, no, I believe that they're right about that. I believe that like they probably do have 85% motors, and you want to know why? Here's where I think the grift is. I am certain, because I've seen this happen with other companies. I've legitimately, I haven't been part of it, but I've observed it from other people and tried to stop them, and yeah, it's a long story. The thing is, all you need to do to make this whole thing work with this whole little video is first lie to people. The second, uh, buy motors from China, bring them to the United States, be a reseller here. Here's the importance of that. When I worked at San Jose State, when it came to buying things, if I bought things myself and got reimbursed, that's one thing. But if I wanted the school to specifically make a payment to, I forget the exact word, but basically make a payment themselves to a company. It would, if it's within like California, there's like no questions asked, pretty easy to do, not an issue. If it's inside of the other states, it's a bit more complicated. If it's outside the United States, it's a huge issue. It's a big process. So it's easier if you simply just buy your equipment from people who are internal. So if this Turntide company basically goes in, buys motors from AliExpress, Alibaba, or eBay, brings them into the United States, checks them off, does some validation on their side, and slaps a motor controller on the side of it, and then sells that to other people in the United States, that's a business. And actually, that's a legitimate business. It doesn't mean that they're, saving the world. It just means that, they are another way to get access to materials in the United States rather than having to go outside the United States. This whole stuff here makes me think that they're probably upselling people a lot on this little thing here, because they make it think it's like it's some big old green energy thing. But yeah, I think that this whole thing is just a grift for them to be basically resellers of the same old induction motors. Also, that B-roll footage they had here. Here's the thing. I used to watch a lot of this B-roll footage of like how steel is made, how aluminum is made, how motors are made, how certain types of actuators are made and put together, and like how they're validated and stuff like that. I found this thing super interesting. You could just go in and take little slices of that, and as long as they're within a certain range, you don't get copyright striked from YouTube. So that's what I feel like they did. They took some B-roll from some factories that put their stuff online, cut out and cropped out the people so they couldn't really see them, so you couldn't get in trouble that way, and threw it into their video to build up more hype.
One that works for Turntide. They're going to say that on a global scale, they are working to slash the energy consumption by half. And they're going to tell you that they're able to do that, and that is what they're going to do.
Both
Our
claims.
work has just begun.
Our roadmap is getting into much more advanced applications, so
Appliances,
electric vehicles,
aerospace.
a motor system that's intelligent.
Just so I know, these type of motors, three-phase induction motors, AC motors, are already in all those things. So, okay.
And not only can minimize energy use and maintenance for the motor itself, but can also propagate those savings into broad.
Before we go any further, I just want you to listen to the music and how it starts to ramp up and how it starts to build up. It's really supposed to create that hype again inside of you, and also creates this feeling of impact. So just kind of listen to it as they speak.
Or systems like HVAC, entire buildings, campuses, and smart cities.
You start to look at this as, fine, this is a product that maybe can save some people some money, but in real terms, they can save hundreds of thousands of lives and hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 going into the atmosphere.
Okay, so here's a callback to things that are actually true. So this thing's full of a whole bunch of true statements in order to make it seem like it's more valid. So yeah, CO2 emissions and like the process from like start to finish when it comes to fossil fuel technologies actually kills more people than any technology out there. Actually, nuclear actually has the least and the lowest cost to humans in general of any sort of energy source. It is so teeny tiny compared to the Mount Everest that is fossil fuels. Then you have, windmills, which are dangerous in their own little right. And then you have, solar panels, which are not that dangerous, except for maybe some of the procedures for developing them, which do toxic chemicals, whatever. Here's the thing. That's true that, if we can reduce our reliance on carbon, on fossil fuels like that, we can save actual lives. That is a real thing. I'm not going to explain it in detail here, but that's a real thing. These 8 motors ain't going to do that. They're making this implicit connection between their technology by stating it in their video, between their technology and that this will actually save lives. Going green and being more sustainable and being more efficient will save lives. Their motor does not do any of these things at all whatsoever. So they're not really part of the solution.
Replacing the motors just in buildings, just in the US, it would be the carbon equivalent of giving the world a brand new Amazon rainforest. And if you branch out to the entire world's impact, it's about the equivalent of adding 7 Amazon rainforest carbon impact. But until now, this was just an idea.
All right, so here's the largest, most dubious claim of all of it, is that like switching to their motors would be like adding 7 or 1 to 7 rainforests. Man, you need some really good evidence for that, because goodness gracious, that is such a bold claim. That's actually one of the claims in here of this entire video that I heard, and I was like, if you aren't even that savvy, I think hearing that, if you're just a little bit skeptical on this kind of things, you go, you know what, that seems like BS. Something seems off. Like that seems a little too good to be true. Why aren't I seeing this on all the news? Why isn't everyone raving about this? Why isn't why aren't we hearing about this everywhere else? Because we hear about small things pop up all the time, but this, nah, it seems ridiculous. That's too big of a claim to be taken seriously. Not saying that there couldn't be technology that kind of does this. It's just that once you hear this, you have to immediately become skeptical. And if you're not, then I think it means that you should be more skeptical when you hear certain claims about things that should make the world a better place in whatever way that they come up with. So yeah. So also I love that little last clip where if you kind of go back, it shows like the Earth, and what they did is they basically just turned the hue from like the normal hue to like the more blue-sided hue to make it seem like there was becoming more green via blue. Not sure what that's supposed to mean. First time I first saw that, I thought it was like, the water rising up and, climate change getting a little too crazy and the ocean's rising and basically taking over all the land. But no, it's supposed to be like, the world becoming more green. So yeah, that's pretty much this video. There's not really much else at the end of this. It's just like, some credits like that. And this in particular, all I have to say to this is that like there are a lot of claims, a lot of videos out there, a lot of news, techno news that's supposed to build up a lot of hype. But when you actually look into the actual articles, into the actual like papers that are generated from these things, it's not as hype as you may think. I actually think that like I love that we have a lot of journalism in the area of science. We have a lot of people who are super into science and climate change like that. But goodness gracious, is this such a prime area, because it has so much demand that people are going to use it to scam people. And this is one of those scams that I can see here. So if you are a VC, this obviously would be a scam to you. If you're looking at a Kickstarter and you're funding it yourself, throwing your own money in there, don't. They can also get money from the government, which would be a waste of government funds. This is the thing that kind of scares me, is that a video this good, at least from the point of view of someone, if I look at it from the lens of someone who's not tech savvy, this could actually be something that could hype people up a lot. But it is very simply just BS. And I really do hope that as that these things, well, my main thing here is that I want that these things are distractions. We need to be more skeptical about any type of technology that comes out, because these things are merely just distractions to keep us away from actually making change in the world, from actually improving our carbon footprint, from actually basically making progress towards a more sustainable future. So that's my video. That's pretty much that. Maybe I'll do more reaction videos to other little things of BS that I see that I haven't already seen other people make reaction videos on, because I actually found this kind of fun. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Actually, not subscribe. I don't really do much on my channel, so whatever. But yeah, like the video, share it around if you think if it was useful to share around. If you want me to be a little more, animated when I make these videos, I can totally do that. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Talk to you guys later.